It's I thirst, it is finished, and Father, into thy hands I give my spirit. Before I go ahead and kind of get into these 3 points, just give you guys a little bit of a background. Maybe you've heard this, maybe you haven't. But when Jesus was on that cross, it wasn't pretty, and it was very painful. I mean, for example, he had already had his back scourged by cattle nine tails, which pretty much had rock, glass, and pieces of metal, glued and wrapped to leather. A lot of people didn't even make it through those 40 lashes. If you did, your back looked like hamburger meat.
Right.
Carrying a 100-pound cross. I'm about 110. And, you know, your back that has hamburger meat, literally, is being scraped by a thorny cross. If he ever wanted to take a breath, he would have to push his nailed-scarred feet up so he can exhale and inhale. So when he was on the cross, whether it was 9 hours or 3 hours, that's what he had to do. He wasn't pierced in his hand. He was pierced pretty much right about here.
Yep.
Maybe right there.
Yeah.
This was considered your hand still.
Yeah.
Take pliers, put it to your funny bone, and twist it for 3 hours. That's what happened. Of course, he suffered from all kind of things, which would be thirst, for example. In John 19, verse 28, he said, I thirst. And I can imagine, you know, one of the people, perhaps it was Mary, as she looked in disgust to see one of the Roman soldiers just kind of look around, because you just heard this guy say with a dry throat, I thirst, while his tongue was sticking to the roof of his mouth probably. And they looked around and they pretty much got a sponge, you know, put the spear in a sponge, dipped it in vinegar. And I can imagine his mother or somebody saying, no, you're not supposed to go ahead and give him that. What are you doing? That sponge is used for just regular people who just have to go to the bathroom and regular restrooms. And you use that vinegar to go ahead and cleanse out all the muck and the poo.
Paint that picture, Matt.
And you're taking that and you're going to go ahead and give that to him. And meanwhile, you got Jesus up there and he's going... And it was like, Jesus, what are you doing? Why do you want to go ahead and put your mouth on that? It doesn't make sense. The Bible doesn't say that he opened up his mouth and reached for it, but I can imagine that he would do something like that. Why on earth would Jesus want to go ahead and taste something like that? The disciples knew why.
Amen. Amen. Yes, they did.
But we see Jesus, who was made a little lower than the angels, for the suffering of death, crowned with glory and honor, that he, by the grace of God, should taste death for every man.
Amen. My Lord.
She was right. He wasn't thinking about himself. When he said, I thirst, what do you think he really thirsted for?
That's right. That's right.
You think he thought about himself thirsting for some water? No. He wanted to taste something that every last one of us should have got that day. He tasted death for every man. He tasted...
Hallelujah.
Come on now.
Hallelujah.
Yes. Hallelujah. Yes.
If that's not love, I don't know what it is.
Amen, brother.
Amen. Amen.
Hallelujah.
John 19:30. It is finished. It's a Greek word, tetelestai. It was used for transactions, for people who were making payments.
Yeah.
And yet, what was the real meaning behind that? Because, you know, the theme up here of the last three sayings is really about death.
Yeah.
Jesus understood death, and so did the Jews, because they understood one thing: covenant. I'm not going to tell you all the details of this next part, because I want you to be thirsty enough to read it for yourself, but read Genesis 15. It's only 21 verses, that's it. It's real short, but it's something real interesting if you want to know about death and covenant. God had made the first covenant with Abraham, and he said, you know what? I want you to go ahead and get 5 animals. But what kind? Not going to tell you. Read it. And he pretty much cut those 5 animals in half. All 5. And back in those days, you could study this. The Suzerain vassal treaties, and Assyrian kings would actually have, you know, covenants where you would actually just cut this animal. And what they would do, they would actually just pass through the animal.
Yeah.
They both would. And they're basically saying, all right, if I don't fulfill my end of the bargain, then whatever happened to that animal may happen to me. Now you go to read the story of Abraham, and I want you to read and tell me who passed through those animals. God was putting his own integrity on the line. God himself was saying, Abraham, if I don't fulfill all this stuff that, you know, I'm going to make you in this covenant, then let that happen to me. That's what God was saying. You even look at how he passed through. It said he passed through with a smoking flax
Yes, they
and
did.
fire. If you don't know what that symbolizes, read Exodus and, you know, definitely get back to me. But look at what happened to Jesus. According to the covenant, who should have been up there that day? He fulfilled the covenant. He was faithful. That's the reason why Abraham didn't have to depend on his own self. No, he just had to depend on God, because God was the one that was faithful with the covenant. And yet it was Jesus, the one who was hanging up there on the cross, who actually bore all the sin in the world, but he never sinned in his life. But yet he experienced what it was like to be a sinner. When he was saying, God, why have you forsaken me? That's what happens to sinners when they're cut off from God. And what happened when Jesus died on the cross? What happened when he actually said those words? Luke 23:46, Father, into thy hands I commit my spirit. Well, if you actually read in Matthew 27:51, it tells you what happened after Jesus died. Remember, we're talking about death and covenant. This is what it says. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in... Rent in what? Two. It was split in half. But yet the law was perfect, but you know, we weren't. We should have been split in half. And you can tell me that he loved you so much that he decided to split the old covenant in half, even though you deserved it, just to make a new covenant with you? Have you read Romans 7?
No.
It's a beautiful analogy. That is the reason why the Apostle Paul said, you know what? We were once married to the law. But when somebody dies, they are free to marry another. And therefore, you now being dead to the law are now married to Christ. And how did he do it? How did he kill the covenant?
Come on now.
He split it in something that should have happened to us. And just like Abraham depended on God's faithfulness, that's how we depend on our salvation.
Amen.
That's what happened at the cross. Father, forgive them. Into thy hands I commit my spirit. It is finished. That's the reason why he said that. It is finished. He fulfilled the covenant. That's how you know that God is faithful and God is loving. Every single act that he did on the cross, he was thinking about you. Even to the point where he ended up tasting death because of what we first tasted back in the garden.
Right.
So many parallels. So many parallels of love. Parallels of love.
Yes.
All throughout the scripture. Nothing but parallels of love.
Amen.
I know we got to move on, but if I ever get a chance to come up here again, I just want to share so much more with y'all. But I pray that this was just more than enough to kiss this day. We thank you, Lord.
Thank
Can everyone
you.
just take a moment?
Yes.
Just take a moment and just begin to think about all the sins and all the stuff that you did and you knew was wrong. You knew you did it before God. And just think about how he was bleeding on the cross just for that. Your sins was in his blood and it was bleeding out.
Yes. Hallelujah. Thank you.
And we thank you, oh Lord, not just because you died, because of how you died.
Thank you, Lord.
Lord, when somebody wants to marry somebody, they set everything up and everything is significant. It's not just something that you do, it's how you do it because it speaks a lot about the person of how you end up approaching them and how you ended up dying, Jesus. There's so many fruits of truth that hold how much you love us in the manner that you died.
Amen.
And we thank you, oh God, and we take it not for granted, oh Lord. You were the one that said, no man take my life. I lay it down on my own accord, and I had the power to take it up. I won't even allow you to kill me. No, I will do it.
Right. My Lord, my Lord, my Lord.
I thank God.
Thank you, Lord.
And so let us just reflect on the significance and the purpose of his death. I love you guys. God bless you.
God bless you.
Thank you, Elder Matt. Thank you, Elder Brenda. Thank you, Elder Tracy.
Yes, amen.
At this time, saints of God, we have come to the most